March 20th, 2022. It was the kind of morning that blankets the Nevada mountains with silence, thin fog hanging low, only broken by the crunch of footsteps on gravel. Harold Monroe, a 71-year-old retired park ranger, had walked the same trail for the last 11 years. A flask of coffee in one hand, his aging retriever Duke on the leash in the other. Just another Sunday stroll through the winding roads above Burro Ridge, a quiet expanse about 20 miles from Carson City. But that morning, something broke the stillness. Harold noticed it first as a dark blotch far down the embankment, too square to be natural. He thought it might have been illegal dumping. The bags, there were 4 of them, jet black, swollen, sealed. His instincts kicked in. Over the years, he'd seen everything from bear carcasses to meth lab waste dumped in these woods. But what he saw when he climbed down that slope would never leave his mind. Inside the first bag was an arm, severed clean at the elbow. Nails painted lavender, stiff from freezing. The smell of antiseptic mixed with something else. Burnt flesh, maybe. Duke started barking wildly as Harold dropped the bag and scrambled to pull out his phone. His hands were shaking so much he could barely hit 911. Within hours, the hillside was flooded with investigators. Hazmat suits. Forensics vans. Crime scene tape fluttering in the wind like yellow ribbons tied to an invisible horror. The contents of the 4 bags formed a grotesque puzzle. 18 pieces in total. A female body, systematically cut, not hacked, apart. Precise. Anatomical. Whoever did this, they weren't guessing. They knew the human form. There was no head. No ID. No wallet. No purse. No fingerprints. The skin had been scorched. Most identifying features had been mutilated or removed. But not all. The detectives noted remnants, 11 tattoos across various limbs. Or at least what was left of them. Many had been deliberately burned or scraped off, but enough lines and curves remained to sketch what had once been butterflies, flowers, and a short quote in cursive lettering, partially intact. If I fall. Even then, they didn't know her name. 3 days into the investigation, the forensic pathologist gave them a timeline. The body had been frozen, likely kept in a household-grade deep freezer for at least 2 months. But before that, the cause of death was already clear. Severe blunt force trauma to the skull and sharp force trauma to the throat. In other words, someone had bludgeoned her, then cut her throat. Not to kill, but to finish what the hammer hadn't. Whoever this woman was, she had suffered. Then came the media storm. A murder in the mountains is one thing. But this? A butchered body. Dismembered, burned, frozen, then discarded in the snow like garbage. The press named it the Icebox murder before they even had a victim. State authorities reached out to neighboring counties and the FBI for missing persons data. But nothing matched. No one with lavender nails. No one with tattoos like hers. No one under 5 feet 3 inches reported missing in the last 3 months in any county within 500 miles. So, who was she? Detective Marlon Reyes, a former Army intelligence officer turned major crimes investigator, was the one to ask the question out loud in the briefing room. What if no one reported her missing because someone made sure no one would? It wasn't rhetorical. Reyes suspected something deeper. This wasn't a panicked killing. This wasn't gang-related. There were no drugs in the bags. No evidence of restraint ropes. No traceable weapons. What there was, however, was method. Cold, calculated, almost obsessively clean execution. They didn't just want her dead, they wanted her erased. A week passed. Then another. The media lost interest. The story was losing momentum, just another unsolved murder. But Reyes couldn't stop. The tattoos gnawed at him. They were personal. Designed. Thought up. Not gang markings or jailhouse ink. One in particular caught his attention. A small phoenix on the inside of the right wrist, mid-flight. He reached out to a digital forensics contractor, a young woman named Bria Kelly, who'd once worked for Meta's moderation team. Together, they started combing through adult content platforms, social media archives, and live stream forums. And that's when the name Jade Monroe surfaced. She wasn't famous, not really. But within certain corners of the adult entertainment world, she had a presence. tattoos matched. Especially the phoenix. It had appeared in multiple photos on her now-dormant Twitter and OnlyFans accounts. Last activity? January 11, 2022. 2 months before her remains were found. They pulled her real name from payment records. Mia Langford, 27, resident of Sierra Lanes, Utah. No missing persons report. No family had called. No alert filed. But that silence would become the darkest clue of all. Sierra Lanes is a forgettable dot on the map, a dusty town 2 hours outside Salt Lake City. A place where people don't ask many questions. Mia had moved there 4 years earlier with her toddler son. She'd been working part-time at a cosmetics outlet. A quiet, private life. But underneath that surface, she was living 2 lives. One as Mia, the tired single mother. The other as Jade Monroe, the digital fantasy. And somewhere along the line, she crossed paths with a man named Edward Voss, a polished, well-spoken banker with a passion for food blogging. No one suspected he was capable of what happened next. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because before anyone even knew Edward existed, Reyes and his team were staring at a name on a screen, wondering, why didn't anyone report Mia Langford missing? The answer, they'd discover, lay in the silence of her phone, and in the chilling replies someone else had been sending through it. They had a name now, Mia Langford. It had taken nearly 2 weeks of forensic combing and digital legwork to get there. No thanks to any missing persons report, because there wasn't one. Mia had simply vanished, and no one, not family, not friends, not even neighbors, had said a word. To Detective Marlon Reyes, that silence was deafening. He stared at her DMV photo for a long time the morning the ID was confirmed. Mia had brown hair, warm-toned skin, a heart-shaped face. Nothing about her image screamed danger, scandal, or tragedy. She looked normal. The kind of person you wouldn't think twice about at a gas station or coffee shop. Yet she had ended up in 4 garbage bags, dumped into the Nevada wilderness, frozen like last month's leftovers. And the world had gone on. Sierra Lanes, population, 4,092. It was the kind of town where Main Street shut down by 7 p.m., and the same 3 trucks were always parked outside the diner. Mia had moved there in 2018 with her 3-year-old son, Elijah, after dropping out of college in Oregon. According to town records, she worked part-time at a cosmetics outlet in a strip mall on the edge of town. She rented a 1-bedroom above an old barbershop, paid rent on time, kept to herself. Neighbors said she was polite quiet. The landlord remembered her as a good tenant, single mom, young, no trouble. But Reyes knew what silence could hide. He asked himself, what kind of life ends like that? In pieces, in bags, and no one notices she's missing? The deeper they dug, the clearer the answer became. Mia had built 2 lives. One above ground, and one in the shadows. Her second life was online. Under the alias Jade Monroe, Mia ran a growing presence on adult content platforms. OnlyFans, Fansly, Twitter. Nothing illegal. Nothing exploitative. Sometimes playful, sometimes provocative. Always filtered through a character. Jade was confident, flirty, bold. The polar opposite of the quiet Mia from Sierra Lanes. The earliest posts dated back to the summer of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. The timing wasn't surprising. Like millions of others, Mia had been laid off during lockdowns. Unemployment barely covered rent. She had a young son. She needed options, fast. For many women, platforms like OnlyFans offered a kind of agency. Autonomy. Fast income, creative control. But Reyes had seen the flip side too. The parasitic followers, the online stalkers, the obsessive clients who blurred the line between fantasy and control. Mia had been careful. She never revealed her location, never showed her son, never used her real name. But digital trails always leave something behind, and so do people. It was during this period, sometime in early 2021, that Edward Voss entered her life. A LinkedIn profile described him as VP of Digital Strategy at a regional bank based in Reno. A middle-aged man with a clean suit, polished smile, and a surprisingly active food blog. His Instagram was full of gourmet dishes, wine pairings, and vacation photos, Always tasteful, always curated. But buried deep in his digital history were different images, private Dropbox links, encrypted file transfers, burner accounts used to commission custom content from online creators. And that was how he met Jade Monroe. At first, it was transactional. He paid for personalized videos, tipped well, requested scripts and costumes. Nothing alarming. He even praised her work professionally, offered suggestions on lighting and camera angles. Some clients are just obsessive hobbyists. But Voss wasn't just watching, he was studying. Over time, their messages grew longer. Then came live calls. Off-platform texting. Private conversations about life, struggles, ambitions. For Mia, it was probably just another client trying to be more than a fan. For Voss, it was something else. He became emotionally invested. Digital records later recovered from Mia's old phone showed a shift around June 2021. Voss began sending gifts, a ring light, a new camera lens, Amazon credits. He asked to help manage her page. Mia agreed, partially. He started editing her videos, running analytics, negotiating collaborations. He was efficient, professional, and he wanted a cut of the profits. She gave him one. To outsiders, they looked like a content creator and her business partner. To Reyes, it smelled like coercion under the disguise of management. One former collaborator told investigators that Mia had confided in her late in 2021. He's helpful but intense. Like, too invested. Sometimes I feel like he thinks we're dating. They weren't. Not officially. But as Reyes traced Voss's emails and message history, it became clear he thought they were. And then came a name that changed everything: Sebastian Cruz. Sebastian was also in the adult industry, not a big name, but respected. He and Mia had worked together in November 2021 on a shoot in Las Vegas. By December, they were dating. Quietly at first, then more openly. He posted a blurry photo of them holding hands on Twitter with a heart emoji. Mia replied with, "Soon." That was January 7, 2022. Mia was planning to move back closer to Salt Lake City to be near her son again. She had told Cruz she wanted to leave the adult industry gradually. She had savings now. She wanted out. And she wanted Edward Voss out of her life. But people like Voss don't handle rejection well. Especially when control is slipping. The last confirmed live sighting of Mia Langford was January 8 at a private event in Las Vegas. She was scheduled to fly to Salt Lake the following week, a flight she never boarded. Her last post under Jade Monroe's account was dated January 11th, a captioned photo. "Just wrapped something intense. Stay tuned." It was written in her tone, her style. But digital forensics would later prove one terrifying detail. It wasn't her who posted it. Before Edward Voss ever became a suspect, he was admired. People in Reno, Nevada knew him as the charming middle-aged banker with a quiet smile and a passion for French cuisine. He ran a food blog called Voss Cooks. Each week, he posted carefully lit photos of coq au vin, lamb tagine, or scallops seared in saffron butter. The captions were elegant and mildly self-deprecating. He liked to call himself an accidental chef in a digital world. His followers, mostly working professionals, some foodies, found comfort in his voice. It was steady, polite, thoughtful. He wrote like someone who had never raised his voice in a room. No one suspected that in his second life, he was managing the content and finances of an online adult entertainer named Jade Monroe. No one suspected that while he was filleting duck breasts on camera, he was also tracking views on explicit videos, replying to DMs from anonymous clients, and reading through scripts for custom commissions. No one suspected that behind that clean kitchen counter sat a freezer, empty at the time, that would one day hold a human body. Reyes and his team obtained a warrant to search Edward's digital records 2 days after they confirmed Mia's identity. What they found was a web of access points, banking records, Dropbox links, burner Gmail accounts, login data for OnlyFans under multiple IPs, all tying Edward to Mia's digital life. He hadn't just helped her edit videos. He had access to everything. Her schedule, her income, her messages, her private folders. He even had a cloned version of her iCloud account set up under a mirror device. a trick often used by tech-savvy stalkers to track everything a person does in real time. Photos, texts, even GPS history. This wasn't just management. It was dominion. Neighbors described Edward as quiet, respectful. Married once, divorce finalized in 2020. No children. Lived alone in a modern 2-story home on the edge of Reno. Always dressed well. Kept his lawn mowed, never played loud music, never brought strangers around. Not the kind of guy you'd even think twice about, one neighbor said. And that was exactly the problem. Because in the months leading up to Mia's death, Edward was becoming someone else entirely, someone who believed Mia belonged to him. The shift began when Mia started dating Sebastian Cruz. In internal chats recovered by forensics, Edward's tone turned bitter. He doesn't know her like I do. She's going to ruin everything she built. I saved her from nothing and now she thinks she can just walk away? He stopped referring to her as Mia and started calling her Jade, even in private messages. When she announced her engagement on social media, Edward didn't react publicly. But inside his shared calendar with her, he added a silent entry. Plan B, January 11th. Reyes stared at that calendar entry for nearly an hour in the task force's digital war room. Plan B, he muttered. She never even made it past January 11th. That date became their focal point. From what investigators could reconstruct, Mia had been offered a custom video commission through a private client message under the name Blues Anada. The request was strange. It involved a domination scenario, ropes, gags, simulated violence, but with one added detail. The attacker would demand Mia's phone passcode as part of the performance. This wasn't normal, even in extreme fantasy content. Mia was cautious. She had messaged a colleague on January 10th saying, "Client's a little intense. Wants realism. Weird vibes, but money's good. I'll keep it light." She never mentioned the name of the client. The payment for the commission was sent in cryptocurrency. The wallet address was traced to a burner exchange tied to, you guessed it, Edward Voss. He had posed as the client, sent the script, chosen the scenario, booked the shoot at his own house. To Mia, it was a job. To Edward, it was an execution. What happened inside that kitchen on January 11th remains partially unknown. But Reyes and the forensic pathologists pieced together the likely sequence. Mia arrived around 2 p.m. Text to Sebastian confirmed she had landed in Reno that morning. She hadn't told him where she was going next. The plan was to surprise him in Salt Lake City the following week with good news. She was quitting the industry, coming home. She never made it. Phone records show Mia's passcode was entered into her iPhone at 2:26 p.m. At 2:37 p.m., Edward used it to access her cloud storage. By 3:12 p.m., he had deactivated location tracking, changed her email recovery info, and logged into all her social platforms. At 3:30 p.m., neighbors reported hearing a thudding sound, like something falling or hitting the floor. At 3:51 p.m., Edward used her phone to respond to a message from Sebastian. "Hey babe, tired? Gonna nap. We'll call you tomorrow." It would be the last message ever sent from Mia's number while she was still alive. Reyes stood in that same kitchen 8 weeks later. It looked like a cooking show set, stainless steel, spotless counters, dried herbs hanging by the window. But in the corner, behind a curtained pantry door, was a deep freezer, new, industrial grade. It had been cleaned, bleached, but not well enough. Under UV light, the lid glowed faintly. So did the floor. And when they opened the backup storage drive Edward had hidden in a false drawer beneath the oven, they found the raw files, unedited footage from January 11th. It started as acting. It didn't end that way. It was supposed to be a scene. That's how Mia approached it, just another custom video request, the kind she'd received dozens of times over the years. A client using the alias Blue Sonata had messaged her with detailed instructions for a role-play scenario involving restraint, domination, and simulated violence. The client wanted it realistic, but Mia had boundaries. She always made that clear. She messaged a fellow creator the night before the shoot. "Script's dark, but I've done darker. It's all props anyway. Nothing I haven't handled." But the moment she walked into Edward Voss's house on January 11, 2022, nothing felt staged. Because it wasn't. Edward greeted her as if it were any other shoot day. He had already set up the lights, arranged the camera angles, laid out the props, duct tape, a rope, a plastic bag, even a toy hammer to use as a prop for the intimidation part of the script. Except it wasn't a toy hammer. He told Mia the script had been paid for by a high-value client. He'd even offered to film and edit the entire scene himself. Keep it professional, he said. Mia agreed, trusting him. After all, they had worked together for over a year. She changed into the outfit requested in the script, a fitted tank top, denim shorts, and bare feet. She asked where the fake blood capsules were. There were none. Edward reassured her. Don't worry, I'll edit it all in post. They did a quick safety check. Mia reiterated her safe word. Edward nodded. And then he turned on the camera. The footage, later recovered from a hidden backup drive, begins like any other performance. Mia plays her role, a confident woman tied to a chair, mouthing off defiantly. Edward remains off-screen, his voice low, commanding. The dialogue is stiff, almost robotic. Then the tone changes. The first blow lands hard, too hard, a loud, sickening crack as the metal hammer strikes the side of her head. Mia jerks in shock, eyes wide. She tries to speak, but the gag is too tight. Another blow. Then another. Blood spills before the minute mark. The camera never cuts. She doesn't scream, she can't. Her mouth is sealed with layers of duct tape. Her hands twist violently against the ropes, but they're secured too well. Edward doesn't stop. In court, prosecutors would later describe this moment as the transition from performance to premeditated slaughter. After the fourth blow, Mia's body slumps. She's still breathing barely. Her chest rises faintly, the rope around her midsection stained dark. And then Edward does something chilling. He kneels beside her and speaks directly into her ear. The camera's mic doesn't capture the words. But whatever he said, it wasn't remorse. Then he lifts a kitchen knife and ends it. In his confession, Edward would claim it was a mercy killing, that she was suffering, and he wanted to end it cleanly. But the evidence told a different story. Because the next 2 hours weren't spent calling 911. They weren't spent panicking or breaking down. They were spent planning. Edward wrapped Mia's body in a plastic sheet and moved her to the basement. He removed the camera's memory card and backed up the footage to a secure drive, encrypted and labeled January Project. Then, using Mia's unlocked phone, he replied to several unread messages. One to Sebastian Cruz. Need a few days to clear my head. Going offline for a bit. Another to her babysitter in Sierra Lanes. Running late on rent, but will drop cash this weekend. He changed her OnlyFans password, archived several old posts, and updated her Twitter with a recycled photo from 3 months earlier. Vegas grind never stops. The image showed her in a red dress, smiling under neon lights. It was taken at a different hotel, in a different city. But it did its job. It bought time. Over the next 3 days, Edward went shopping. Receipts later traced to him included a heavy-duty electric saw, industrial-strength trash bags, butcher gloves, bleach and disinfectants, a 14-cubic-foot chest freezer delivered to his garage, a large meat grinder purchased online using Mia's own PayPal account. This wasn't cleanup. This was systematic erasure. He began the dismemberment on January 13th. The medical examiner would later testify that the cuts were precise, efficient, someone with knowledge of anatomical structure, likely from hunting or extensive food preparation. It made sense. Edward had once trained as a sous chef before switching careers to finance. He knew how to break down a body. The process took days. He worked late at night wearing headphones to block out the sounds. He refrigerated some pieces, burned others in a backyard fire pit. The smell was masked by garlic, rosemary, and beef stew, cooked loudly the next morning, posted proudly on his blog. Comfort Food Sunday, the caption read, "Nothing heals like slow-simmered bone broth." By February, Edward was living 2 lives with clinical precision. By day, he was a banker, food blogger, community volunteer. By night, He was texting Mia's clients, fulfilling paid orders with recycled videos, cashing out her accounts, and answering her messages with eerily accurate impersonations. He even scheduled a fake trip to Dubai using her account, just in case anyone asked why she wasn't posting. For 2 months, no one suspected a thing. Except for one man. A journalist. March 24, 2022. Sierra News Wire published a short, vague update about the Burrow Ridge dismemberment case. The article included only sparse details. Unidentified female remains found in black trash bags near the Nevada highlands. Tattoos partially destroyed. Investigation ongoing. The story would have been swallowed whole by the news cycle, buried under headlines about wildfires and midterm campaigns, if it hadn't caught the eye of Caleb Marsh, a freelance crime journalist based in Salt Lake City. Caleb was 44. Worn denim jacket, nicotine-stained fingers, and a sixth sense for stories that didn't add up. He wasn't flashy. Never went viral. But he followed threads, especially the kind the public forgot. He kept a pinboard of unsolveds above his desk. Red string. Duct tape. Coffee stains. When he saw the word dismemberment paired with no ID and tattoos removed, something in his gut tightened. Someone went through a lot of trouble, he muttered, but didn't hide the body. That's not fear. That's ego. Caleb started with the tattoos. The article mentioned 11 designs, all partially burned or scraped, but one survived, a phoenix, mid-flight, on the inside of the right wrist. That was unusual. Caleb had covered dozens of cold cases, but rarely had he seen mutilations so deliberate yet so incomplete. He reverse-searched old adult content forums and subscription platforms. It didn't take long. The name, Jade Monroe, surfaced again and again, tagged in photos, listed in collabs, mentioned in old livestream transcripts. Caleb sifted through image archives, zooming in on arm angles and lighting. On a 2021 Christmas-themed shoot, he froze. There was right wrist. Phoenix. Black and red. Wings just like the forensic sketch. You have a name, Caleb whispered to the screen. Now let's see if you're still breathing. He cross-referenced social handles, burner accounts, and fan pages. Most of Jade's content had stopped around mid-January. The last few posts felt the captions lacked her usual sarcasm. Emojis overused. Phrasing robotic. On a gut hunch, Caleb contacted a mutual of hers, another creator based in Arizona. He asked casually, "Hey, has Jade been active lately?" Her posts feel ghost-written. The reply came fast. "Where'd you say that? I messaged her 3 weeks ago, asked if she wanted to collab in Vegas. She said she was quitting everything and moving to Dubai." Felt rushed. No emojis. Not her vibe. Dubai. Caleb had heard that word before, in a tweet on Jade's account from February. "Taking some time for myself. Dubai calling airplane yellow heart." He checked the metadata. Posted from Reno, Nevada. That was the crack. Jade, or whoever was controlling her account, hadn't masked location services properly. He traced the IP, a residential broadband in northwest Reno. Caleb froze. Reno. Where the freezer had been traced. Where Mia Langford had vanished. He ran a Hoy's lookup on an old domain linked to her OnlyFans bio, one she'd taken down months ago but forgotten to anonymize. It led to a name, Mia L., registered in Utah. That was it. Mia Langford. A woman who no one had reported missing. A woman whose face no one recognized, because someone had been pretending to be her for nearly 3 months. Caleb picked up the phone. He called the number listed on Mia's former booking form, still live on a cached fan page. Ring. No answer. He waited 10 minutes. Called again. This time, someone picked up, but said nothing. Just ambient static. A faint, electrical hum. "Hello?" Caleb asked softly. "Is this Mia?" No reply. He kept the call open for 28 seconds before the line went dead. He tried texting. "Hi Mia, I'm working on a feature about adult creators who left the business. Wanted to know if you're open to talking. Strictly off the record." A minute later, he got a response. "Not interested. Please don't message again." The tone was stiff. Wrong. Caleb had read through enough of Jade Monroe's past writing to know her voice. This wasn't it. He replied. Totally understand. Just want to make sure you're okay. There's been talk about a woman with similar tattoos found in Nevada. I'd hate for people to worry if you're just offline. He watched the typing bubbles. Then nothing. Message left on read. Caleb sat still for a moment. Then he reached for his recorder and whispered, I don't think she's reading those messages. I think the person who killed her is. He faced a choice. He could run the story immediately, blow it wide open, get the clicks, maybe even land a network spot. Or he could go to law enforcement. He looked at the case board behind his desk, full of unsolveds he hadn't been able to help. This one he could. March 27th, Caleb Marsh walked into the Salt Lake City Police Department with a printed timeline, a flash drive, and a hunch that had just become something else, evidence. He handed everything over to the lead investigator on the Nevada case. He didn't publish the full story. Not yet. But 2 days later, the police did. March 29, 2022. The identity of the woman found at Burrow Ridge was confirmed via DNA, Mia Langford. And that same morning, the man living in Northwest Reno, the same man who had cooked duck confit and posted it online with a smile, was taken into custody. Edward Voss was arrested. Inside his kitchen freezer, police found bone fragments, strands of long brown hair, and a single gold ring, engraved with a date. January 7, 22. Her engagement ring. When detectives entered Edward Voss's home on the morning of March 29th, everything looked exactly as it should. The kitchen was immaculate. White countertops, a spice rack organized alphabetically, a knife block gleaming under LED track lighting. There were fresh herbs on the windowsill, a handwritten grocery list on the fridge, and sourdough rising under a towel on the counter. A soft playlist of jazz piano trickled in from the living room speaker. It didn't feel like the home of a killer. But downstairs, behind a padlocked pantry door, detectives found the freezer. It was large, white, industrial grade, the kind you'd find in a butcher's shop, not a bachelor's kitchen. There were fingerprints on the lid, inside and out. The smell of bleach hung thick in the air, but chemical traces couldn't hide the truth. Inside, sealed in vacuum bags and double-wrapped in trash liners, were bone fragments, charred tissue, and what would later be confirmed as human scalp with strands of long brown hair. Folded into a plastic sandwich bag was a single, delicate gold ring, still bearing the faint engraving. January 7, 22. Mia Langford's engagement ring. Meanwhile, in the Digital Crimes Division, analysts were unlocking the real horror, her phone. Or rather, what Edward had done with it. Since January 11th, the day of Mia's murder, her phone had remained active. Edward had used it daily. He answered dozens of text messages, responded to emails from clients and friends, updated her OnlyFans and Twitter with scheduled posts, made purchases using her Apple Pay, paid rent for her apartment in Sierra Lanes via mobile banking. He even messaged her babysitter to delay picking up her son, saying, "Going abroad for a few months. He's safer with his dad. We'll explain later." For 68 consecutive days, Edward impersonated Mia flawlessly. He knew her voice, from years of recorded footage. He knew her language, every emoji, slang, timing. He had practiced copying her writing tone in replies. He even wrote diary-style posts on her behalf, like, "Some days are just too heavy, but I'm learning to forgive the past." To her followers, Mia never died. She just got quiet. In the interrogation room that night, Edward Voss wore a gray pullover and a slight smile. He sat with perfect posture, hands folded in his lap. The kind of composure only someone certain of their own intellect could maintain. Detective Marlon Reyes opened a black binder. Inside, printouts of message logs, screenshots, timestamps, and receipts. "You've been busy," Reyes said. Edward blinked once, smiled faintly. "I'm a detail-oriented person." For the first 3 hours, Edward denied everything. He claimed he hadn't seen Mia in over a year, that they had a falling out after creative differences, and that he had no idea where she was. He said the messages Caleb Marsh had received weren't from him, they were probably automated. Reyes didn't interrupt. He just laid out the evidence. The crypto wallet address that paid for the violent script? Created on Edward's own laptop. The IP address linked to her OnlyFans login? Traced to his home router. The meat grinder? Ordered with her phone. The footage? Recovered from a hidden drive under his oven. And the freezer? Stained with DNA. At that, Edward's demeanor cracked. For the first time, he leaned back. Not to relax, but to distance himself from the truth pressing in. At 2:14 a.m., Reyes slid the last piece across the table, a printed still frame from the unreleased footage. Mia's bound face. Her eyes open. Terrified. Reyes tapped the image. She trusted you. Edward didn't respond, but his breathing changed. Through the nose. Eyes flickering, unfocused. And then, quietly, not a breakdown, not an outburst, just a flat, bone-dry whisper. She was leaving. I gave her everything. And she was leaving anyway. Over the next 4 hours, Edward confessed in fragments. He admitted to scripting the scene under a false identity. He admitted he intended to scare her into staying, but that it spiraled. He said the hammer wasn't supposed to be real. That he bought it last minute. That something took over when she looked at him like she didn't fear him anymore. He called it a misfire of love. Reyes called it first-degree murder. The next week, the media erupted. Banker turned butcher. The double life of Edward Voss. Fake life, real death. The social media cover-up. Engaged to a ghost. The woman who disappeared but kept posting. But in Sierra Lanes, there was only silence. Elijah, Mia's 6-year-old son, was too young to understand what had happened. Too young to know why his mother never came home. Too young to know that the man who used to film her smiles had frozen her body for weeks, then cut it into pieces. All he would ever know is that she disappeared, and that no one looked for her fast enough. In May 2023, Edward Voss was indicted for premeditated murder, desecration of a corpse, fraudulent impersonation, obstruction of justice. He pled not guilty to all charges. His lawyers claimed emotional trauma and delusional fixation. But the court had video. The court had digital logs. And the court had the freezer. June 12, 2023. The courtroom in Washoe County was packed. Reporters sat shoulder to shoulder with crime bloggers and local residents who had followed the case for months. In the front row sat Mia Langford's parents, hands clasped, eyes forward. On the other side, the seat reserved for Edward Voss's defense team remained empty, except for one junior associate, expressionless. When Edward was led in, he wore a navy suit and a neutral expression. No handcuffs. He moved like someone attending a business conference, not standing trial for the murder and dismemberment of a woman he once claimed to love. The trial had lasted 11 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The footage. The freezer. The forged messages. The purchases made with Mia's phone. The script he had written himself, posing as a fictional client. There were no questions about what happened. Only why, and what the law would call it. The prosecution argued premeditated murder, aggravated by deception, cruelty, and financial motive. They showed how Edward had not only killed Mia, but impersonated her, continued to profit from her digital accounts, and prolonged the illusion that she was alive, not out of fear, but to control the narrative. He didn't just want her dead, the prosecutor said. He wanted to rewrite her ending and profit from it. The defense painted a different picture. They argued emotional breakdown, a man abandoned, manipulated, betrayed. They called it a moment of uncontrollable rage, not a cold-blooded execution. They pointed to Edward's clean record, his unstable mental state, and his willingness to cooperate during questioning. They said he was not a monster, but a man who broke under the weight of obsession. The jury deliberated for 2 days. And then came the verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. Not guilty of premeditation. Guilty of desecration of a corpse. Guilty of digital fraud and impersonation. Edward Voss was sentenced to 30 years in prison. No possibility of parole for the first 25. The courtroom didn't erupt. There was no gasp. No tears. Only a long silence. A shared breath of something like disbelief. Because for many, it wasn't enough. Outside the courthouse, Mia's father, Robert Langford, addressed a small group of reporters. His voice was calm, but his words sharp. My daughter was dismembered, erased, and puppeteered like a doll for months. 30 years means he gets out in his 60s. Mia never made it past 27. Her mother simply said, "He stole her voice." And they let him keep his. In the days that followed, debate ignited. Legal scholars argued over the wording of the statute. Should the script Edward wrote, with its violent, detailed instructions, have counted as premeditation? Should the impersonation of Mia postmortem have factored into the sentence for psychological cruelty? And what of the footage? Why hadn't the court ruled it torture? But the law had spoken. As for Edward, he showed no emotion during sentencing. No apology. No direct address to the family. Just a blank stare as the judge spoke of lost potential, manipulated technology, and an unfathomable breach of trust. He was taken away quietly. But the aftermath didn't fade. Mia's story began to circulate in podcasts, documentaries, and exposés about digital identity after death. Her case became a cautionary tale in creator communities, not just about stalkers or abusive clients, but about control, trust, and how even the people closest to you can become your captors. Some called it the ultimate parasocial relationship gone wrong. Others just called it murder wearing a smile. Her son, Elijah, remained in Sierra Lanes with his maternal grandparents. He still thought his mom was on a long trip, though they were starting to explain pieces of the truth. He kept her photo on his bedside table. Not the glamour shots. Not the viral screenshots. Just a simple picture of Mia, in a hoodie, holding him in one arm while brushing his hair back with the other. A mother. A daughter. A human being. In the end, there were no perfect conclusions. No scripted revenge. No poetic justice. Only a woman who disappeared. And a man who thought if he controlled her voice, he could control her forever. But even the most carefully curated lies can't hold up under a real investigation. Because the truth, like a freezer in a spotless kitchen, always leaves a cold trail behind.